Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're mapping out the fascinating chronological lineage of American Unitarianism and Universalism. We're going to trace how a series of frankly pretty fiery theological debates in Europe crossed the Atlantic, took root in the intellectual hubs of the newly formed United States, and completely transformed the religious landscape of early America.
To really understand this massive shift, we first need to set the historical stage. So, do you think everyone living during the American Revolution was a strict, devout churchgoer? It's a super common myth, but when you look closely at the historical data, it simply isn't true. Many of the nation's early figures were actually deists, and regular church attendance just wasn't as universal as popular folklore might have us believe. In fact, scholars estimate that around 1780, so right after the Revolutionary War, only about 3/5, or roughly 60% of the American population regularly attended church. Now, while attendance was definitely higher than official church membership, this still means a significant chunk of the new nation was spiritually unattached. And that created a really fertile environment for new, highly rational religious movements to take hold. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Religion after the Revolution, 2. The rise of Universalism, 3. European roots of Unitarianism, 4. Unitarianism comes to America, 5. The Transcendentalist spin-off, and 6. What do Unitarians believe? Section 1. Religion after the Revolution, the post-war church landscape. Section 2. The rise of Universalism, God's grace for all. Following the Revolutionary War, the established churches faced a massive shakeup. The pro-British Anglicans saw their numbers absolutely plummet, Congregationalists kind of maintained their footing, and groups like the Quakers and Baptists were largely unaffected. Right in the middle of this fragmented post-war ecosystem, a British man named John Murray arrived in America in 1770, preaching a completely new message: universalism. Simply put, this is the belief that all people will ultimately be saved and redeemed. It completely rejects the concept of an eternal hell. For a lot of thinkers at the time, Christianity was viewed as a very rational, reasonable religion, and to them, it just seemed logical that a loving God's grace would eventually extend to absolutely everyone, no exceptions. But it wasn't a monolith. There were actually 3 specific, nuanced views within early Universalism. First, they believed Christ made full payment for all people, which was a direct, sharp reaction against the Calvinist doctrine of predestination and the elect. Second, some folks believed in an immediate presence with God right after death. And third, to account for human sin and freedom, they introduced the idea of a temporary time of purification after death. So, not an eternal hell, but more of a purging period before eventually meeting God. Section 3. European roots of Unitarianism, the push for monotheism. Now, while Universalism was taking root in America, a parallel movement was brewing back in Europe, and this was Unitarianism. Fundamentally, this movement is defined by a disbelief in the traditional Christian Trinity. Instead, it places a strict, unwavering emphasis on pure monotheism, the absolute oneness of God. Early adherents felt that the concept of the Trinity actually contradicted monotheism entirely. Tracing this lineage, we've got to go back to 1533 when Michael Servetus went to Geneva to debate the reformer John Calvin on the Trinity. Now, Servetus was famously arrested and executed, not specifically by Calvin, but by civil authorities who genuinely believed that heretics threatened the entire social order. But the movement survived. In 17th century England, John Biddle organized it with a real missionary zeal. Later on, high-profile figures like the renowned scientist Dr. Joseph Priestley helped popularize the theology until it was finally recognized as a legitimate religion in England in 1813. And this brilliantly illustrates the internal shift that eventually fractured the movement over in England. Initially, you had biblical Unitarians. They relied heavily on Scripture to argue for a singular God of love, basically wrestling with texts about miracles and the resurrection. But over generations, a new group emerged, the rational Unitarians. They decided they didn't really need the Bible at all, believing everything could be deduced strictly through human reason. Eventually, the conservative biblical wing died out entirely in England, leaving a strictly rational religion. Section 4. Unitarianism comes to America, the Boston hub. So, how did these highly rational European ideas actually cross the ocean? Well, the beachhead was established in Boston in 1785. James Freeman was a priest at King's Chapel, which, interestingly enough, was originally a traditional Anglican church. In a pretty historic move, Freeman led his entire congregation away from Anglicanism and into this new theology, making King's Chapel the very first Unitarian church in America. It's actually a site you can still walk past on the Freedom Trail today.
But listen, if Freeman opened the door, this man walked through it and basically built the house. William Ellery Channing is widely considered the primary driver, the father of American Unitarianism. Preaching from his Federal Street Congregational Church in Boston, Channing became the central intellectual and spiritual force shaping the movement in the early 19th century. Let's look at how this quickly built into a massive institutional powerhouse. In 1815, Channing officially led his church into Unitarianism. Then the 1816 anchor point is absolutely crucial. Harvard University, which was originally founded way back in 1636 to train Orthodox Puritan preachers, established its divinity school as a distinctly Unitarian institution. This gave the movement profound academic credibility. Finally, in 1825, Channing founded the American Unitarian Association to organize this rapidly growing network of churches. Section 5. The Transcendentalist Spin-off, Emerson's Rebellion. Almost as soon as Unitarianism became the established religious elite in Boston, a rebellion started brewing from within its own ranks. This was spearheaded by the intellectual giant Ralph Waldo Emerson. He and his peers were essentially fed up with the strict, cold rationality of Unitarianism. While Unitarians were deeply rooted in the Enlightenment, demanding logical proof and reasoned arguments, the Transcendentalists fully embraced the burgeoning Romantic movement. They didn't want a religion of the mind, they wanted a religion of the heart, driven by intuition and deep inner personal experience. The core tenets of this Transcendentalist spin-off were pretty radical for the time. By totally rejecting rationalism and embracing Romanticism, they argued that religious truth comes purely through intuition. You didn't need a church building. You didn't need a Bible. They believed God dwells inside every single human heart. And in a nearly pantheistic way, they believed God is fully present within the natural world itself. It was a highly elite literary movement, but it heavily influenced broader American culture. Section 6. What do Unitarians believe? A theological summary. So if Transcendentalism was the rebellious child, what was the parent institution actually teaching from the pulpits of places like Harvard and King's Chapel? Well, Unitarianism is often described as being defined more by the historic Orthodox traditions it rejects than by what it actually affirms. On the positive side, they heavily affirm charity, loving your neighbor, a very high view of human reason, and viewing Jesus as a highly ethical, good moral teacher. Conversely, they strictly deny the Trinity, the doctrine of the atonement, the concept of original sin, and any Calvinistic ideas of predestination. It effectively became a theology of salvation by good morals and ethics. Over the decades, because Unitarians already believed in salvation through a moral life and heavily doubted the existence of eternal punishment, they had largely become universalist in everyday practice. Recognizing this profound theological overlap, the two historic movements officially merged in the year 1961. This formed the Unitarian Universalist denomination we see today, which is headquartered right in Boston. Which leaves us to ponder the trajectory of this really fascinating slice of history. From the fiery debates of 16th century Europe to the rational pulpits of 19th century Boston, these movements systematically dismantled orthodox doctrines in favor of human reason and intuition. But it raises a super compelling question. If a belief system is defined primarily by the established traditions it rejects, what is the ultimate foundation that binds its community together in the long run? Think about that for a bit, and keep exploring the fascinating ways history shapes our worldview. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.